with that, welcome, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for coming out on this rainy, stormy day. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being willing to come down here. I know this is deadline day, but thank you, sir, for being here.
Good morning, Gerard. Thank you for having us. Good to be here on a stormy Wednesday.
Yeah, so we've been keeping our audience abreast of the activities with respect to the weather. We had Executive Director of MEMA, Stephen McCraney, on the program earlier, giving us an update. He does a fantastic job, as you know, and so do all the staff at MEMA. We are very grateful for them, and he let us know that they started positioning resources and assets yesterday in advance of this, knowing this was out there, and he said they'd be around at least throughout the day until everything's kind of cleared up. But anyhow, appreciate you being here.
Yes, sir. They do a good job of course, they communicate through the governor's office to us, and then the governor passes that on to us, and we can let, like for instance, I can let my particular representatives know who have areas specifically that are either fixing to be impacted, they think, or that have been severely impacted. So they do an excellent job of keeping us informed and certainly warned on the front end as well.
They do. So we've had a lot of activity so far, not a lot of results, I would say. It just seems like that.
So is the process, they say, right?
I understand, yeah. But, you start out, I guess it's fair to say, with very optimistic high hopes when you sit down and start a new session. But I think that's every session, right? And you get through what you can. That's the way the process works, as you indicate. The latest, which is one of the things we wanted to focus on, and glad you're able to be with us today, was the discussion and some legislation concerning how we fund K through 12 education in the state of Mississippi. Some differing views on that. I think that's safe to say, between the House and the Senate on what that mechanism should look like. We had Rob Robertson and Kent McCarty from the Education Committee in your chamber on the program, sharing with us the details of the Inspire Act. It made a lot of sense to me, Mr. Speaker. I liked it. But unfortunately, the Senate didn't.
It made a lot of sense to us. And of course, everybody's going to say, well, that's your child. Of course, we all love our children, right? It's a house product. It was a house product, but it didn't fall out of the air. We're not necessarily reinventing the wheel. Other states use funding formulas very similar and have had great results with them. And so, we weren't reinventing the wheel. And as you remember, because you're plugged in, we passed a funding rewrite in 2018 in the House, and it fell by a couple of votes in the Senate. And this plan takes that plan and makes it even better, in my opinion. So I thought we improved on that. I thought it checked all the boxes. I still think it does. And so I'm still very optimistic that we're going to find some common ground. And I think the Senate, while they didn't buy into our Inspire plan, if you will, a funding formula. The tale is in the fact that even they had a bill that changed MAEP, that tweaked it and tried to fix some of the discrepancies and the problems with it. Yeah. So even in that chamber, even though we're not on the same page exactly right now about where to go with the funding formula, it's a tale that they actually had a bill that changed it, that modified it, that reformed it. And so kind of like our debates in healthcare and some other things, at least we're in a place where it's fixing to force a major discussion on the issue, because you've got the formula. I've said this, I think, to you specifically. Let's acknowledge one of the good traits of a formula ought to be that it's followed. And we've never followed the formula for MAEP, and it's only been fully funded twice. In its history, 25 years, funded twice. So let's acknowledge that, and don't knock a new formula simply because somebody says the base student cost is it's too objective. It's too subjective.
You about need a mathematician, honestly.
You do. But even that formula had a starting point that some folks sat around in a room and came up with. So
sure.
I'm still optimistic. I hear the music. We may be going to a break.
Yeah, we are.
Slid in here late,
but the Inspire Act at this point, let's talk some more about it. I got a very direct question I'm going to ask you about it. It's a procedural sort of question on the other side of the break. We've got Speaker of the House Jason White in the Element Well studio. We're back with you in the Element Well studio. We're pleased to have the Speaker of the House, Jason White, with us today. So before we went to break, Mr. Speaker, we were talking about this Inspire Act, the Inspire formula, and I just want to pass on real quickly what it kind of does. It's understandable, that's the first thing, but it starts with a base funding level, just like MAEP does today, and so that nothing major changed there. But there's some adjustments, if you will, weighted factors that include low income, special education, English language learner. We have a number of students in our public schools, as you know, that are having to learn the English language as a second language, honestly. It's not their native language. And then so much for gifted students, a small amount, career and technical education, concentrated poverty, sparsity. That's just to accommodate the additional expense of getting the kids to school in the buses. I mean, all that honestly made sense to me.
And nobody has shot a hole in any of that. It's just when you go through that, and one of those you went through quick that we're excited about as we move forward and look at it, and that is the weight for CTE.
Yeah.
That's the direction we want to move to as much as we can. That's not to throw cold water on our college prep. It's just to say, let's acknowledge that there's this other economy and this other world that's out there, and most of our students end up in that world and not in the college prep 4-year university degree route. That route. Let's acknowledge that, and let's do things to bolster that and accelerate Mississippi. Donnie Bell, our House Chairman of Workforce, man, they have worked hard on that stuff. And that is an integral piece of this formula. And we even want to incentivize that more as we move through the process. And so it just feels like it's just a whole bunch of fits and starts around, change is hard, something that's been with us this long.
I agree. That's right.
I get it. So we're going to continue to push. We're not going away on the issue. I don't even think it's over for this year. Of course, my staff accuses me sometimes of being too optimistic, but I just think if folks will sit down and take the time, and we may get that opportunity, before this session's over with. We've still got almost a month left, and most things are off the table. We're fixing to shine a bright light on that one issue because everything else is going to be done. And so you can go home or you can stay here and talk about this issue. And that's the direction we want to go. And Dennis DeBar, Chairman of Education in the Senate, for all of his statements yesterday, and nothing he said was outlandish, and he also didn't say he wasn't for the bill. The main thing that I understood him to say was he did not understand it and he had questions.
Sure.
Now, I say you can dig in about 72 hours, you can understand it all. And any questions you have, there's smart people that can answer them. But again, I want us to get to a place where we can have those discussions. And if we've got things wrong with it, we want to fix them and move on. Our only die in the ditch, if you will, is we are ready to move away from this formula that is unattainable and not understandable and transparent by most people, most reasonable people's outlook. Let's move away from that. Other than that, everything's on the table. Let's figure it out. And that's why we were disappointed yesterday when they took the unusual move to kill a bill 2 weeks prematurely. Like the deadline for those bills, whether they wanted to take their plan or our plan on a funding formula rewrite, was not due until April 25th. And so to just take the premature move to kill it indicated to me a little bit of now it looks more like there's a different movement afoot, and it's not about being open and being considerate of other ideas. So that was disappointing to our House members who have taken a big stand on this issue.
And I know that in particular Rob and Kent worked really hard on this deal, and they did, I think, yeoman's work of explaining it. I mean, they had it committed to memory.
They do.
You know that.
They do.
And they could, just on a whim, start rattling off all the provisions. The lieutenant governor said, I know you've seen the statement, he said he's not married to the current formula, but they believe that something like this, an appropriation as significant as this, which we all know makes up more than half of our general fund, he says it should be vetted and discussed with stakeholders. Well, I don't think you disagree with that.
I don't disagree with that, but I would tell you the stakeholders are the parents, the children, and the taxpayers and voters of Mississippi.
Yeah.
And they sent 174 members to that Capitol to represent them in the form of government that we have. And you've got one chamber who has, in this instance, the House chamber, who has said, this is the direction we want to go, and posted in excess of 95 votes on the issue. That's better than a 75% majority in that chamber. And that's pretty strong around there on any issue. So to get that kind of buy-in and some bipartisan buy-in on an issue indicates you're kind of moving in a general consensus area. So, all right, there's that. You've also got our executive branch who has weighed in on the issue and supports this move to the Inspire funding formula. And I don't take that lightly because, I have learned around that place a lot of times 2 beats 1. I mean, that's just the nature of it. I'm not flaunting that. I'm just saying
that's absolutely right.
We welcomed the governor's support of it. He's a numbers guy and he gets it. And so we welcomed that support. So now we're down to the last piece, if you will, is the Senate. And so for all of a sudden to say, well, we want to see what MDE thinks about it. Nobody's bashing on MDE. I think they're the folks over there that are supposed to run our school system. I think we're the policymakers that are supposed to implement the policy that the people of Mississippi want to see. And I think the House of Representatives has spoken as the people's chamber on the direction they want to go with education funding. And it's reform and transparency and student-centered, not system-centered, not teacher units, not all these other things, but specific to each individual student.
The governor, to your point, Mr. Speaker, made that point in his State of the State address where he said we need to be funding students, not systems.
Right.
And the MEP formula does feel a little bit like it just sort of funds systems.
It does.
And not students. But when you look at these adjustment factors, these weighted adjustment factors in the Inspire Act, I mean, those are for specific groups of students and needs of those students.
Correct.
Something else you said I just want to point out is that the Accelerate program in the state of Mississippi, which I believe everybody in the legislature supports and the governor does, it was a critical element in our ability to recruit AWS here to Mississippi.
It was.
And the largest investment ever.
And they'll play a pivotal role in the next project.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. So I think changing the funding formula so that we accentuate the CTE aspect of K through 12 certainly makes sense.
It makes sense. It just makes sense. And so anyway,
all right.
We're looking forward to
Might we go to conference possibly on this?
Well, that was what's so unusual about the Senate's actions yesterday, parliamentary-wise. Normally when you say when you return a bill to the other chamber from where it originated, the choices are you can concur in the changes the House made to your bill, or you can invite conference. And Chairman DeBar's motion was simply to not concur. So in essence, maybe it had the legal ramifications as they saw it as killing the bill. I would just tell you there's really not a parliamentary purgatory where bills go. They're either in conference or they're there to concur or invite conference. They don't,
Gotcha.
So that's in no man's land. But regardless of that, regardless of where it is, there are other vehicles alive. And I thought for the Senate also to critique and the Lieutenant Governor's statement yesterday about just too much, too fast, we're open, we're not married to the formula and those kind of things. But yet we're going to lob a teacher pay raise and a $200 million increase. It looked more like a smokescreen from where the direction we really want to go and the conversations we want to have about the way we fund K-12 public education. It looked like there was no seriousness to that. It was just simply thrown out there to say, look over here, but we're going to give you a pay raise. I mean, come on, that came out of left field.
Yeah. Let's hope we can get something done here. How could anybody disagree that significant change is not needed here, especially when you consider the fact if you went around the two houses and asked the members if they could explain the MAEP formula to you? I don't know that anybody could. Honestly.
I can't do it. They're half a dozen, and Hob Bryan doesn't count.
I mean, Senator DeBar, he's been working with this a long time. Richard Bennett on your side has been working with that a long time. But beyond that, you got to dig into it. It just seems like we need something a little more understandable that seems to align more with reality.
And goes with however the students you actually have in your school.
Yeah. We appreciate you being here. Let's come back on the other side and dig in a little bit to PERS. And we got appropriations coming up. We'll talk about our financial situation as well. We got Speaker of the House, Jason White, in the Element Wealth studio. Well, studio, we appreciate you joining us today. We got the Speaker of the House, Jason White, in with us. So we talked about education funding. We'll see where all that goes. Who knows? We might be looking at a special session down the road here to get money over there to the whole education conglomerate in the state of Mississippi if we don't get something out of appropriations. We'll see.
Let's hope not, Gerard. Let's hope we get there a different way.
Okay, I'm with you. All right, let's talk about the public employees retirement system. Has anything ignited quite the level of communication? How about that? As this matter has this year. Rhino and I were talking about it. He's been in this business longer than I. We can't think of anything.
Probably not. Certainly in my legislative years. When I poured my first cup of coffee early this morning, I saw that you were engaged or had been engaged on Facebook with Friends of PERS,
yep.
Of which I would say to folks, my wife, my mother, my father are all members. You know, they're this idea, and that's not unique to me. That's most lawmakers. They either have somebody in their family, if it's not a spouse or a child
sure.
or a parent, it's somebody very close in their immediate family that is in PERS, that is either an active employee or a retiree. This is not an us versus them type thing. This is about trying to help. Now, the problem is, and some folks want to bash the PERS board. Here's my take on the PERS board.
Okay.
They are doing exactly what statute, the number one duty it puts on them, which is to preserve and promote the plan. They're not there for the taxpayer. I'm not saying they don't consider it. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But it's not their duty. I'm not giving them an excuse or an out. I'm just saying their duty is to have that fund in such a way that it can pay for the benefits that were promised retirees, promised workers as they work through their employment. Nobody begrudges them of their benefits. Nobody says the PERS board is, the bad guys for funding those things.
Right.
The issue becomes we were told we were 95% funded or on the road to that. And then in less than 24 months, we're at 55 or 6%. And some of that is some accounting there, but some of it is actuarial, some of it is reality, some of it is lowering the assumed rate of return. There are lots of different levers that got pulled, and that caused a panic. Because here's what's ultimately a fact, and you've said this: you got benefits and you got inputs, and you got a little bit of or a lot of investment income. There are no other.
Yeah, there's not a lot of options.
There's not a lot of options.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of options. And that plan is backed by the full faith and credit of the taxpayers of the state of Mississippi. And so when you start telling representatives and senators that they're going to have to figure out a way to fund a $25 billion, I understand those are future benefits. Not everybody's retiring today. But when you get that percentage down below 80, 75%, and you start getting closer to 50%, and projections look like it's going below 50%, folks start getting real nervous and scared about that because they are correct. It's the legislature's duty to fund it. So that caused everybody to want to push the pause button.
It's the present value, by the way, as you know, of future income streams, less the present value of future benefit obligations is how they arrive at that figure. It's not exactly, it means, hey, if everybody took retirement, we shut it down today.
Right.
That's a different calculation, and I know you know that, but for the benefit of our audience. But nonetheless, so this bill goes over to the Senate. They had 2.5 hours of hearings, as you know, the bill HB 1590, which would have restructured the board. And
pause the 2%.
And pause the 2%, thank you. And so Senator Chris Johnson, after talking with his committee, decided not to take the bill up in committee, and thus it effectively died. But now we understand from yesterday, Senator David Parker has inserted language in another bill that would at least not only pause the 2% scheduled to go into effect July 1st, but also essentially strip the authority away from the board to adjust the employer contribution rate. Now, you shared with me before you came on something similar is happening in the House.
Yes, sir. You are correct, and that is the bill as I understood Senator Parker's explanation and just a quick look at the bill. They amended a House bill that had to do with the University of Mississippi Medical Center and some of their joint ventures. It had some code sections related to PERS in it.
Yep.
They took that bill and retooled it, if you will, to add the things you just mentioned. The pause of the 2% employer increase, as well as taking from the board the ability to raise the employer contribution going forward. That would only be done by the legislature.
Yep.
I think it also called for the PERS board to get two actuarial recommendations for any actions they want to take and bring those to the legislature, and the legislature would ultimately have to put that into law in the form of legislation to allow those things to go into place. Yes, very similar legislation just passed off the House floor in an amended bill that the chairman of Ways and Means passed off the floor here probably about 30 minutes ago. That was put in a different bill, a Senate bill that had those code sections in it as well.
I got you. All right.
So there are two different vehicles allowed. That one will be going to the Senate. Theirs will be coming to the House for concurrence or conference.
Would you consider perhaps, Mr. Speaker, if this issue continues to get debated, which I'm quite sure it will, perhaps a board structure where there's equal representation? Maybe there's 10 members, 4 that are elected by the PERS organization, the members, and then 4 from appointed.
Sure. Look, we're open to any and all of that. And I don't know why, a lot of folks jump to conclusions that any appointed board member wouldn't be a PERS retiree.
Right. Right.
There, as you noted from your contact through social media and otherwise, there are lots of PERS retirees, lots of smart people. The people on the board now, nobody's saying they don't know what they're doing or they're wrong. They're saying, look, y'all, it's time for a fresh look of a fresh set of eyes to look at this thing and be sure we're headed in the right direction because of the alarms that went off. And admittedly so, the PERS board came with ideas, if you will. They sent a letter over to the lieutenant governor and to my office with some ideas back late winter, right at the first of the year with their recommendations. Lots of things. We were looking for direct recommendations from them on how to get out of this hole we're in, and those things weren't part of that. Yes, there were valid recommendations. We were looking for a partnership on those issues and not just, hey, it's on you. Here's what you could do. We're not doing any of that, but here's what you could do. We were looking for a partnership. And certainly, I want to say this too. We understand it's going to take more money.
Yeah.
Nobody around the Capitol doesn't believe and understand that it's going to take more money.
I've shared that as well.
We're willing to put our money where our mouth is, but we got to know we're headed to a place where we're going to be on solid footing going forward.
Senator Parker even said as much yesterday. He said, he indicated at least that it looked like an injection of cash was going to be needed. And I know that's one of the things the board asked for, right? They asked for an increase and that.
Again, this isn't trying to pit anybody against anybody.
Sure.
But for the first time, not only were cities and counties, local governments standing up saying, wait a minute, this is too much, too fast. Taxpayers for the first time, because of all the attention that this deal got, were like, wait a minute. You're telling me that taxpayers pay this amount and retirees pay this amount, and hey, legislature has nobody to blame but themselves. Legislature set that system up, but most people don't know. We pay a very attractive rate. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. That is one of the few reasons folks stick around in state employment. I'll acknowledge that.
Or work in public sector.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The reason they come and stay there specifically is because of the great retirement benefits. Nobody's
can't get in the private sector.
Yes, that's correct. We're all for it. Nobody's against that. It's just saying it's such a great system. It is one of the things that attracts people to state government as far as employment.
So I got to ask you this: it's a recommendation for what it's worth. There's a lot of folks that believe that the supplemental legislative retirement plan is a reason, if not the reason, that the PERS program is facing financial headwinds. Now, mathematically, financially, economically, that's not the case. They're totally separate. It's a drop in the bucket. But from an optics perspective, would you consider phasing that program out, supplemental legislative program? Take care of everybody that's vested is what I would say. You got to do that. You got an obligation.
Yeah, again, nothing is off the table. And again, as I've alluded to, past legislatures, that Now, I hadn't dropped the bill to do away with it. I did drop a bill in my first session to let folks just opt out of PERS that when they came into state employment and say, no, I want to do my own thing. And that was when I first learned about the heat that comes with PERS legislation, Gerard. So, look, I think even the special legislative retirement program, all of that's on the table. All of it's going to be looked at it and real. We'll see where we get. And this idea that we're all in this boat together.
Yeah, I know. Well, we certainly appreciate you coming in, Mr. Speaker. If you want to stay, I got another segment left. If you got to go,
we got to get back. We got lots of fires burning down.
I understand. I know you do. It's deadline day, but
I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you coming on.
Tell my good friend Sam Valentine when he gets here I said hello.
He may be out in the green room.
All right, I'll tell him myself. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Mr. Speaker. We're coming right back, folks, in the Element Wealth studio.